The call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. My father was in the emergency room. 31 chain lashes across his body, ribs shattered, skull fractured. When I arrived, the doctors wouldn't let me see him for another hour. I stood in that waiting room, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from something darker. Something I thought I'd left behind when I took off the uniform. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The fluorescent lights of the hospital burned my eyes. I'd been standing in the same spot for what felt like an eternity, though the wall clock said only 14 minutes had passed since I'd arrived. The receptionist kept giving me these sympathetic looks, the kind people give when they know something's broken and they're not sure how to fix it. My phone buzzed. Mason, my oldest brother. Where are you? Mom's freaking out. Hospital, I said. Dad got attacked. Silence. How bad? I don't know yet. They won't let me back. I hung up before he could ask more questions. I couldn't explain it. Not yet. Not when I didn't know what I was dealing with. A nurse finally appeared. Young, tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much today. Your father's stabilizing. You can see him now, but only for a few minutes. He needs rest. The ICU was cold. Sterile. The kind of place that strips away everything except the raw fact of human fragility. My father lay on the bed like something that had already given up on being alive. Bandages covered his chest. His left arm was in a cast. His face, God, his face was unrecognizable. Swollen. Purple bruising spreading across his jaw like a disease. I stepped closer. His eyes opened slightly. Took him a moment to focus. When he did, I saw something flicker there. Not pain, but recognition. Like he knew I was coming. Like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Son, he whispered. His voice sounded like gravel dragged across concrete. Don't talk, Dad. Just rest. Listen. His hand moved, found mine. His grip was still there, even broken. The man who did this. His name is Victor. Biker. Runs the Midnight Riders out of Riverside. He came to the shop. Said I owed him. Protection money. From years ago. Years ago? Dad, you haven't been involved in that life for not involved enough to say no. His eyes closed. But involved enough to die if I don't pay. My stomach tightened. I thought my father had left all of that behind. The old world. The shadows. When I joined the military, when I became a soldier, he promised me he was done. Clean. Legitimate. Running an auto shop. Living a normal life. But the old world never really lets you go. I knew that better than most. How much? I asked. 50,000. First payment. Then monthly. He said if I don't, he'd come back. And next time, it wouldn't just be me. The meaning hung between us. He meant my mother, my siblings, my family. Did you go to the police? My father's laugh was brittle, painful. The officer who took my report knew Victor. Knew him well. Suggested maybe I'd misunderstood the situation. Suggested maybe I should just pay what I owed. The blood in my veins went cold. Not shocked. I'd seen corruption before. In different countries, different uniforms, but it was always the same poison. Authority that protected the predators instead of the prey. Dad, when did this happen? This attack. This morning. I was opening the shop. He came with 3 others. They had chains. His voice trailed off. His eyes squeezed shut, like he was reliving it. 31 lashes. I counted them. Each one deliberate. Like he was making a point. A point. That I can't run from this. That nobody can. The monitors around him beeped steadily. His heart rate was climbing. A nurse appeared in the doorway, the same one from before, and gave me a look that said time's up. I'll be back tomorrow, I said, squeezing his hand. No, he whispered. You need to do something for me. Anything. There's a safety deposit box. Bank of America on 5th Street. The key is in my office. Back of the desk drawer, taped to the underside. His eyes opened fully now, fixed on mine. Whatever you do, don't open it tonight. Not here. Take it somewhere safe. And when you do open it, when I do, you'll understand why this happened, and you'll know what needs to happen next. Before I could ask what he meant, the nurse appeared again. He needs to rest now. I left him there, broken and bandaged, with questions I wasn't ready to ask and answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The parking lot was empty except for my truck. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, hands on the wheel. 31 chain lashes. The number wouldn't leave my head. It was deliberate, calculated. Not just violence, a message. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. A text message, "Your father owes. You can pay, or you can watch him pay. Choose." I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I started the engine and drove toward my father's auto shop. I needed to find that key. I needed to know what he was hiding. And I needed to understand what I was walking into. Because something in my chest, something I'd buried deep when I left the Army Rangers, was starting to wake up. A part of me that knew how to hurt people, that knew how to make them disappear. A part I'd promised myself I would never let loose again. But standing in that hospital, looking at my father's broken body, I realized promises are just words. And words don't mean anything when your family's blood is spilled. The auto shop smelled like motor oil and rust, the same smell it had carried for 15 years. I flicked on the lights. The space came alive in shadows and fluorescence. Dad's office was in the back, a small room with a cluttered desk, filing cabinets, and a calendar from 2019 still hanging on the wall. He never was good at moving forward. I found the key exactly where he said it would be, taped to the underside of the desk drawer. Small, silver, the kind that looked like it belonged to something important. I slipped it into my pocket without opening the box yet. He'd been clear about that. Not tonight, not here. Instead, I did what I should have done first. I called the Riverside Police Department. The detective who answered had a name like gravel, Sergeant Colin Hayes. He agreed to meet me at the station. Said he was the one handling my father's case. When I arrived, he was already waiting. Early 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of tired that comes from years of seeing things you can't unsee. He shook my hand firmly and led me to an interrogation room. Not his office. An interrogation room. That should have been my first warning. "Your father's case is challenging," Hayes said, sliding a folder across the table. "Street assault. No cameras in the area. No witnesses willing to come forward. The descriptions he gave us are vague." Vague? He got beaten with a chain 31 times. That's not vague. That's attempted murder. He survived, though. That matters in court. Attempted murder requires intent to kill. What we have here might be aggravated assault. Different charge. Different sentence. I leaned back in the metal chair. It scraped against the floor. He told me the man's name. Victor. Runs the Midnight Riders Motorcycle Club. Hayes's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He closed the folder slowly. "Your father mentioned anything else? Any history with Victor? Any reason Victor might want to hurt him?" He said it was about protection money. Money my father supposedly owed from years ago. Did he pay? No. He got attacked instead. Hayes nodded like that confirmed something he already suspected. "Look, I'll be straight with you. The Midnight Riders are a complicated situation in this city. They've been around for 20 years. Most of the time, they keep to themselves. When there's trouble, it's usually internal. Gang politics. My father's not in a gang. No, but he may have had dealings with people who were. That's a dangerous position to be in." I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger yet. Clarity. The clarity of understanding that I was sitting across from a man who wasn't going to help me. "Are you investigating Victor?" "We're investigating the assault." "That's different." "It's the same thing." Hayes stood up. The conversation was over. "I'll do what I can, but I need to be honest with you. Cases like this, street violence, no witnesses, no clear motive, they're hard to prosecute. Especially if the victim has any connection to criminal activity. And from what I'm hearing, your father does. He runs an auto shop. Now he does. But his history is complicated. That complicates everything. My advice: tell your father to let this go. Pay what he owes. Move forward." I stood up too, slowly. "He's in the hospital with a fractured skull." "I know, and I'm sorry about that. But sometimes people owe debts they can't run from. Sometimes it's better to settle them quietly than to make noise that brings more trouble down on your family. It hit me then. The tone, the dismissal, the way he wasn't really investigating anything. Hayes wasn't incompetent. He was complicit, not necessarily working with Victor directly, but working around him, protecting him, letting him operate. I walked out of the station without another word. The next day, I tried a different approach. Called a lawyer I knew, someone I'd met years ago when I was still sorting through the legal aftermath of military service. Her name was Clara. She was the kind of woman who made old men nervous and young men think twice. When I explained the situation, she went quiet for a long moment. "Your father involved in organized crime?" she asked. "Not anymore. He says he paid his dues. Left that life. The problem is, people like Victor don't believe in retirement. Once you're in, you're in. The only way out is death or prison." She paused. "Which one did your father choose?" "Neither. He chose to live quietly, run a business, be a father. Noble, but naive." "Did the police take a report?" "Yes. Detective named Hayes. He basically told me my father should pay what he owes and stop making trouble." I heard Clara put down her coffee. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. "Hayes is on Victor's payroll. Not directly. It's more subtle than that. Hayes looks the other way. In exchange, Victor keeps the street violence to a minimum in Hayes's district. It's a transaction. Your father getting brutalized is part of the cost of that transaction. So we have no way in?" "I didn't say that. But if we go through the normal channels, police, district attorney, we're going to hit walls. They'll slow walk everything. Lose evidence. Suddenly witnesses won't remember anything. By the time this reaches a courtroom, Victor will have an alibi and 3 character witnesses. Then what do? We build a parallel case. We gather evidence independently. We find people who'll talk off the record. We document everything. And then we take it somewhere it can actually be used." "Where?" "Federal level. They don't have relationships with local cops. They don't owe favors to motorcycle clubs. If we can get enough evidence to them, they might open an investigation. That changes everything. But first, I needed to know what was in that safety deposit box." I drove back to my apartment, a small place in the industrial part of town, the kind of neighborhood where people don't ask questions and don't look directly at each other. I'd rented it when I left the military, wanting something that wasn't permanent. 15 years later, I still hadn't moved. There was something comfortable about impermanence, like I was always ready to leave. I opened the box that night. Inside were documents, photographs, handwritten notes spanning over 2 decades, records of transactions, dates, names, amounts of money, and at the bottom, a letter, addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. I didn't read the letter that night. I couldn't. The photographs alone, showing Victor with local politicians, judges, business owners, were enough to make my stomach sick. My father hadn't just documented his own crimes. He'd documented an entire ecosystem of corruption, and he'd kept it secret for years, waiting, like he knew this day would come, like he'd been preparing for exactly this moment. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Another text. "Enjoy the memories? Your father was smart to save them. Smarter to know when to let them go. You should do the same. For your mother's sake." They knew about the box. They knew what was in it. They'd probably always known. And now they knew I knew. The game had changed. I wasn't investigating a simple assault anymore. I was holding evidence that could destroy powerful people. And those people knew I was holding it. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I had the courage to open it. I'd read the documents instead. The photographs. The transaction records. But the letter, that felt different. Personal. Final. Like once I read it, something would change permanently, and I couldn't go back. On the 3rd night, I poured whiskey I didn't want to drink and opened the envelope. "Son, if you're reading this, then Victor has made his move. I've been expecting it for years. Not hoping for it, expecting it. There's a difference. I need you to understand something before you do anything. Before you make decisions that will reshape your life and everyone in it. I wasn't a good man. I'm not asking you to forgive me for that. I'm asking you to understand. When I was your age, I was angry. The world felt unfair. People had advantages I didn't. Doors opened for them that stayed closed for me. So when Victor approached me, back when he was just another angry man on a motorcycle, I listened. He offered money, respect, belonging, all the things a young man without direction needs. I did things I'm not proud of. Loan sharking, intimidation. Once, maybe worse. I never asked questions about where the money came from or what it was used for. That was the deal. Money and silence. You don't get one without the other. But then you were born, and everything changed. Suddenly, all those things I thought I wanted, the respect, the fear in people's eyes, the money, they felt like poison. Like I was contaminating something pure. So I got out. It took 3 years. It cost me everything we had saved. But I got out. And I never looked back. Except I did save everything. Every record. Every photograph. Every name and transaction. I told myself it was insurance. That if Victor ever came after me, I'd have leverage. But that was a lie I told myself. The real reason I kept it was because I knew you'd eventually need it. Because I knew this day would come. And I knew you were the only person who could do something with it. You're a ranger, son. You know how to operate in spaces where normal rules don't apply. Where justice is improvised because the system is broken. I raised you to be better than me. But I also raised you to understand that sometimes, better men have to do necessary things. What I'm about to tell you will hurt you. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about me. But you need to know it. The man who beat me wasn't just collecting a debt. He was sending a message. He knows I've been documenting his operations for the last 5 years. He knows I was planning to turn everything over to federal authorities. This attack, it wasn't random. It was a warning. And it was a test. Victor wanted to see if I'd crack. If I'd finally use the insurance I've been holding. And more importantly, he wanted to see if you would. He's been watching you. Since you left the military. He knows who you were. What you're capable of. And he's been waiting for an excuse to recruit you or eliminate you. This is that excuse. But listen to me carefully. Don't become what he wants you to become. Don't let rage make your decisions. I didn't raise a killer. I raised a soldier. There's a difference. Soldiers have strategy. Soldiers have patience. Soldiers understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the truth. Use what I've given you. But use it right. Love. Dad, I read the letter 3 times. Then I poured the whiskey down the sink. My father wasn't a victim of circumstance. He wasn't an innocent man caught in an old debt. He was a strategist. He'd been playing a long game the entire time. He'd let himself be beaten to wake me up, to pull me into this. And he'd done it knowing exactly what he was doing. Part of me felt betrayed. Part of me felt something else. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. He'd been more like me than I wanted to admit. The next morning, I called Clara back. This time, I told her everything. He's terminal, I said. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Cancer. Maybe 6 months. He's known for a while. Clara didn't say anything for a long moment. That changes the calculus. He's not running from consequences because he's not worried about them anymore. He's making sure we are. He wants justice, not revenge. Is there a difference? He seemed to think so. Over the next week, Clara and I began the process of organizing the evidence. We contacted a federal prosecutor named Evan Rodriguez. He worked in white-collar crime and organized crime. When we showed him the photographs and records, he went quiet. The kind of quiet that meant he was calculating risk and reward. This is explosive, he said finally. If these photographs are genuine, and if we can corroborate them, we're looking at multiple felonies. Corruption, money laundering, conspiracy, probably RICO violations. Can you open an investigation? I can. But you understand what that means. Once I do, Victor will know. He'll move fast. He'll try to suppress evidence. He might try to suppress witnesses. He looked directly at me. He might try to suppress you. I know. Do you? Because from what I can see, you have a lot to lose. Family. A quiet life. Your mother's still alive. Yes. Then you need to understand that Victor will threaten her. Will threaten your siblings. This isn't abstract. It gets very personal, very fast. He was right, of course, but I'd already made the calculation. The alternative was letting Victor operate freely, letting him collect debts from desperate people, letting the police look the other way while he built his empire, and letting my father die knowing his son didn't have the spine to finish what he started. Open the investigation, I said. Evan nodded slowly. I'll need to coordinate with ATF and FBI. This might take a few weeks to set up properly. In the meantime, you need to be careful, and you need to prepare yourself for something. What? Your father's involvement in organized crime isn't going to stay hidden. When we move against Victor, his lawyers are going to dig into everyone connected to him. That includes your father. There will be criminal exposure. He won't live long enough to see trial. I know, but his legacy will be questioned. People will call him a criminal. Some of what they say will be true. I'd already accepted that. My father had made peace with it. What mattered was that the man responsible for his suffering would be held accountable. What mattered was that the system would be exposed for what it was, a protection racket for powerful men and a death trap for everyone else. That same night, I received another text from the unknown number. Your father talked to you. That's disappointing. We gave him a chance to accept his position. He chose not to. Now we have to make different choices about you. How many chances will you get? I didn't respond, but I understood the message. They'd escalated. They'd moved from threat to countdown. I had a limited amount of time before they decided I was too much of a liability. I visited my father again. He was stronger now. The bandages had come off most of his body. What remained were scars and bruises that were already beginning to fade. But the damage underneath, the broken ribs, the fractured skull, that would take longer. You read the letter, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. Are you angry? I sat down next to his bed. Took a moment to find the right answer. I'm something. Not sure what to call it yet. That's honest at least. He looked out the window. I've been thinking about something while I've been here. About what I put you in the middle of. I keep telling myself it was necessary. That you were the only one who could handle it. But maybe I was just a selfish old man who wanted to offload his mess before I died. You were giving me a choice. That's different than making the choice for me. Is it? Or did I just disguise the choice so well that you thought you were making it freely? I didn't have an answer for that. The truth was probably somewhere in between. I got a call, my father continued, from someone claiming to represent Victor. They said if I pressed charges, they'd hurt your mother. If I talked to lawyers, they'd hurt your siblings. If I cooperated with any investigation, they'd hurt me again. And this time, they wouldn't leave me alive. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know what you're up against. Victor doesn't do empty threats. He doesn't make promises he doesn't keep. If you're really going after him, you need to understand that this won't end with a courtroom. It won't end with a prison sentence. He has too much power for that. Whatever happens to him, it's going to come down to something else. Something darker. What are you saying? I'm saying that justice and revenge might look the same from a distance. But up close, they're different weapons. And I need to know which one you're planning to use. Outside, the hospital parking lot was filling with evening shadows. Somewhere in the building, machines beeped and monitors recorded the slow decline of human bodies. My father lay in his bed, broken but not defeated. And I sat beside him, holding the weight of his secrets, wondering which choice I'd actually made, and whether that choice would destroy me. The federal investigation officially opened on a Tuesday. Evan Rodriguez sent me an encrypted email with a single line, "We're live. Stay sharp." That's when things accelerated in ways I didn't anticipate. My phone started ringing at odd hours. Unknown callers who didn't speak, just breathed into the receiver before hanging up. My apartment had been entered. Nothing stolen, nothing obviously disturbed, but small things were different. A coffee mug I never used suddenly sat on the counter. My bedroom window was unlocked when I knew I'd locked it. They were sending a message. "We can reach you whenever we want." I moved into a hotel. Paid cash. Told no one except Clara and Evan. That's also when I made a decision that changed everything. I contacted my former commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Tristan. We hadn't spoken in 7 years. When he answered the phone, his voice carried the weight of that silence. I need a favor, I said. I figured. People don't call me out of the blue unless they need something. He paused. Where are you? I told him. Within an hour, we were sitting in a parking garage 3 blocks from my hotel. Tristan looked older than I remembered. Grayer. But his eyes were still sharp, the kind of sharp that comes from seeing too much of the world's machinery from the inside. Your father, he said. Military. No. He was involved with organized crime. Got out 20 years ago. Recently got pulled back in. Now I'm involved. How involved? I have evidence that could take down a significant criminal operation. But the operation has deep roots. Police, probably judges, definitely politicians. Tristan nodded like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. And you want what exactly? Protection? Resources? I want to know if there's a way to do this legally. Through channels that can't be corrupted. He laughed. A short, bitter sound. Son, every channel gets corrupted eventually. That's not pessimism. That's just mathematics. Power corrupts. It's not an exception. It's a rule. Then what do I do? You work with people who aren't easily corrupted because they have nothing left to lose. People like federal prosecutors who've already built their reputation. People like me. He leaned back in his seat. I left active duty, but I didn't leave the system. I work in liaison, connecting military intelligence with civilian law enforcement when national security is involved. Your case might fall under that umbrella. How? The Midnight Riders have connections to international organized crime. Mexican cartels, specifically. If we can establish that link, it becomes a federal matter. Possibly even a national security matter. And that means resources you can't imagine. Surveillance, undercover operations, witness protection. But it also means risk. If they're connected to cartels, the risk was always there. At least this way, you're not alone. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with federal agents I'd never met. They came to the hotel in pairs, always different pairs, always professional. They set up surveillance on Victor's operations. They monitored his phone calls. They documented his meetings with city officials and police officers. What they found was worse than I expected. Victor wasn't just a local crime boss. He was part of a larger network that extended across state lines. The Midnight Riders were a front for a cartel operation that moved drugs, weapons, and occasionally people. The local police corruption was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And my father's involvement, years ago, had been deeper than he'd admitted in his letter. One of the federal agents, a woman named Brooke Sullivan, sharp-eyed and ruthless in the way that comes from years of undercover work, showed me the files. Your father wasn't just documenting, she said. He was extracting. For the last 5 years, he's been actively removing money from Victor's operations. Small amounts. Nothing that would trigger an audit. But steady. Consistent. We're talking about $230,000. Why? That's what we're trying to figure out. The money didn't go into his personal accounts. It went into trust funds. Educational funds. Trusts set up for family members he never named. I understood then. My father hadn't just been gathering insurance. He'd been extracting restitution, paying back what he'd taken during his years in the life, preparing for the day when everything came apart. There's something else, Brooke continued. Victor knows about the money. He's been calculating exactly how much was taken, and he's been waiting for the right moment to make a move. The attack on your father, it was about punishment, but it was also about sending you a message. About reminding you that you're not just fighting a criminal. You're fighting someone who knows how to hurt you in ways you can't prepare for. He's threatened my family. He's done more than threaten. We've intercepted communications about your mother, about your siblings. Victor has people assigned to watch them. He's not going to move on them unless you force his hand. But the infrastructure is there. The plan is there. It's just waiting for the right trigger. That night, I drove to my parents' house for the first time since the attack. My mother answered the door, and the moment I saw her face, I understood what my father had sacrificed. She looked like someone who'd been slowly disappearing. She was eating, sleeping, going through the motions of life. But something essential was gone. The woman who'd raised me to believe in justice and dignity had been replaced by someone terrified of shadows. We need to talk about you leaving the city, I said. I'm not leaving, she said. This is my home. Mom, it's not safe. It's not safe for you. For me, it's already decided. If I run, Victor wins. If I stay and they hurt me anyway, at least I'm not a coward. She poured coffee neither of us wanted. Your father told me what he did, what he's asking you to do. I want you to know that I support it. But I also want you to know that I'm proud of you for trying to do it the right way. What if the right way doesn't work? Then at least we'll know he tried. That matters more than you think. I stayed that night in my childhood bedroom. Nothing had changed. Sports trophies on the shelves. Military academy acceptance letter framed on the wall. Photographs of a life I thought I'd left behind. Looking at those pictures, I realized my father had been preparing me for this my entire life. Not explicitly, but through every choice he made, every example he set. He'd taught me that survival sometimes required sacrifice, that loyalty had a price, that doing the right thing often meant standing alone. The next morning, I received a call from Evan Rodriguez. We're moving forward with a federal grand jury. We'll present evidence in 2 weeks. That's when this becomes public. That's when everything changes. What do you need from me? I need you to be ready to testify. I need you to be willing to go on record about the threats. And I need you to understand that once you do that, you're a marked man. Witness protection will be offered. You should accept it. What about my family? Can be protected under the same program, but they have to agree to it. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. 2 weeks. That's how much time I had before my entire life became a matter of public record. Before my father's crimes and my own involvement were documented and available for anyone to see. Before the fragile normalcy I'd constructed since leaving the military would be permanently destroyed. I drove back to the hotel and found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no postage, just a single photograph inside. It was my mother, at the grocery store, in focus, clear, dated that morning. Attached was a note, written in careful block letters. 2 weeks is too long. Victor changes his mind. You come to us. You bring the evidence. You walk away. Your family lives. You refuse, and your mother's next photograph will have a different ending. Choose. I sat on the hotel bed, holding that photograph, and felt something inside me break open. Not from fear, from clarity. The legal system wasn't going to protect my family. Federal prosecutors and undercover agents and surveillance teams, they could document crimes. But they couldn't prevent what was about to happen if I didn't move first. My father had said there was a difference between justice and revenge. But standing in that hotel room, holding a photograph of my mother, I realized they might be closer than he thought. I called Brooke Sullivan. I need to know everything about Victor's operation. Everything. Where he operates from. Who he meets with. His security. All of it. Why? Because I'm going to stop him. And I'm going to do it before that grand jury convenes. That's not the plan. That's not. I know what the plan is. But the plan doesn't account for the fact that Victor doesn't play by legal rules. He plays by survival rules. So I'm going to beat him at his own game. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'll send you everything, Brooke said finally. But understand something. Once you do this, once you step outside the system, you become the thing people feared you'd become. There's no coming back from that. I know. Do you? Because I've seen Rangers before. I've seen what happens when they decide to operate outside the law. Even with good intentions, even trying to protect family, it doesn't end well. It never does. But I'd already made the decision. The Ranger in me, the part one thought I'd left behind when I took off the uniform, was awake now. And it was hungry. The photographs arrived every day. My mother at the bank. My mother walking through the park. My mother at church on Sunday morning. Each one a reminder that Victor's reach extended everywhere, that nowhere was safe, that the only currency he respected was fear. I stopped going home. I stopped calling my mother directly. Only texted through encrypted apps. I moved hotels twice more. I was living like a ghost, existing in spaces between moments, and the isolation was starting to reshape me in ways I didn't fully understand. That's when Harper came back. We'd been together for 8 years before I'd pushed her away. The military had done damage to me that I couldn't articulate, so I'd channeled it into distance. She'd tried for years to reach across that distance. Eventually, she stopped trying. We'd separated 6 months before my father got attacked. The divorce papers were sitting on my kitchen counter, still unsigned, still waiting. She called my old number, which I'd abandoned. Then she called Evan, who gave her my hotel information. When she showed up at my door, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair shorter. She looked tired, but her eyes were the same, warm and devastated in equal measure. "You're not answering calls," she said. "I'm handling something." "I know you are. Everyone in the city knows you are. There's federal grand jury subpoenas being issued. Your name's all over discovery documents that half the police department can see. You're not exactly being subtle." I let her into the room. The hotel was generic and depressing, the kind of place where people came to disappear. Harper sat on the edge of the bed like she was afraid it might contaminate her. "The kids miss you," she said. "I know. I'm sorry. That's not enough anymore. Sorry doesn't work. Mason's asking why his father isn't at his soccer games. Eliza's having nightmares. And I'm having conversations with lawyers about custody because I'm not sure you're stable enough to be around them." The words hit harder than any physical violence could. "I'm protecting you. I'm protecting them." From what? From you? Because that's what it feels like. You're pushing us away, and when I ask why, you won't tell me. When I ask what's happening, you give me pieces of a story that don't add up. And now federal agents are calling me, asking me questions about your father and organized crime, and she stopped, her voice cracking. "I don't even know what you're mixed up in." I told her, not everything, but enough. About my father's past. About Victor. About the photographs and the threats and the decision I'd made to move outside the normal investigative process. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stood up and walked to the window. Looked out at the city spreading below us. All those lives. All those people who had no idea that the system protecting them was fundamentally broken. "So you're going to become a vigilante," she said quietly. "You're going to do whatever it takes to stop Victor, and you're willing to sacrifice everything for that, including us." "I'm trying to protect everything. Everyone." "No, you're trying to control everything. There's a difference." She turned to face me. "You think you're the only one who can fix this. You think your family needs you to be the instrument of justice. But what we actually need is for you to be here, to be present, to be the man I married, not the soldier you were. That man's gone, Harper. He never really existed. He was just a cover for this." I gestured to myself, to the empty hotel room, to the life I was living in the margins. "This is what I am. What I've always been." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant she let me go. Saw the moment she made peace with losing me. It was worse than anger. It was acceptance. "I came here because I thought there might be a conversation we could have," she said, "where you might choose your family over this obsession. But you've already made your choice. You made it the moment your father got attacked. You chose revenge. I chose justice. Justice is what you tell yourself. Revenge is what you're actually doing." She moved toward the door. "I'm going to file for full custody. I'm going to tell the court that you're unstable and potentially involved in criminal activity. I'm going to make sure my children are protected from whatever you're about to do. Harper, don't do this. I'm not the one doing this. You are. I'm just responding to it." She left, and I didn't try to stop her. That night, I drank alone in my hotel room and understood for the first time the true cost of what I was doing. Not to myself. I'd made peace with sacrificing myself. But to the people who loved me. Harper wasn't wrong. I'd chosen this. I'd chosen a ghost version of justice over the warm reality of a life with someone who actually cared about me. The next morning, my lawyer called. Harper had already filed the custody petition. She was also filing a motion to freeze my assets pending the court's determination. She was making sure I couldn't run, couldn't disappear with the kids, couldn't drag them into whatever storm was coming. It was the most effective move she could have made. Not because it hurt me. I'd already accepted loss. but because it confirmed that I was on a path that separated me from normal life, that I was becoming something other than human, something instrumental, something shaped entirely by rage and purpose. Brooke called that same afternoon. We need to talk about timing. Victor's becoming erratic. He's making moves that don't make sense strategically. He's consolidating resources, moving money offshore, changing the structure of his operations. He knows the grand jury is coming. He knows something's coming. We're not sure if he knows specifically about the federal investigation or if he just senses that his window is closing. Either way, he's preparing to either fight or flee. Within a week, maybe less. A week. That's how much time was left before this became public. Before my involvement was undeniable. Before the choice I'd made would become irreversible. I spent that week reviewing everything Brooke had given me. Maps of Victor's operations, personnel files on his key people, security protocols, routes he took, patterns in his behavior. I was building a profile of a man I'd never met, but had come to know intimately through data and intelligence. Victor was 53 years old. He'd been involved in organized crime for 32 years. He'd been arrested 7 times and convicted never, a testament to the corruption infrastructure he'd built. He had no wife, no serious relationships, no known children. His entire life was structured around control and power. He was also, I realized, completely isolated in ways I was only beginning to understand. A man like that, someone who'd spent 3 decades living through fear and intimidation, probably didn't have real relationships, probably didn't have moments of vulnerability or trust. His entire existence was a constant calculation of threat and response. I understood him because I was becoming him. The thought terrified me more than any physical threat could. On the 6th day, I received a call from my father. His voice was weaker now. The cancer was accelerating. I heard about Harper, he said. News travels fast. Your mother told me. I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry for putting you in a position where you had to choose. I made my choice. That's on me. No, it's on me. I orchestrated this. I set everything in motion knowing exactly what would happen. I used my attack as a trigger because I knew it was the only thing that would push you to action. And in doing that, I destroyed your marriage and separated you from your children. I didn't say anything. I need to tell you something, he continued. Something I haven't told you yet because I was afraid you'd stop if you knew the truth. The truth about what? About why Victor really came after me. It wasn't about old debts. It wasn't about money I owed. It was personal. Years ago, when I was still involved, Victor made a move against a rival operation. People died. Innocent people. And I helped him do it. I drove the car. I was there. The words landed like a physical blow. You killed people? I was part of it. Same thing. He coughed. A wet, painful sound. One of those people was someone Victor wanted dead. Someone who'd rejected him. And I helped him do it. That was the bind that tied me to him. That was why I could never fully leave. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to understand what you're stepping into. This isn't just about stopping a criminal. This is about being honest about what you might have to do to stop him. And I need to know if you can live with that. If you can become the thing that needs to be done without losing yourself completely. I don't know if I can do that. Then don't, he said quietly. Walk away. Let Evan handle it. Let the federal system work. Let me die knowing I failed, rather than knowing I destroyed my son. But we both knew I wasn't going to walk away. We both knew that I'd already crossed too many lines. That Harper had already filed for custody. That my face was going to be attached to this case for the rest of my life. That the ranger in me, the thing I'd tried to bury, was fully awake now and had no intention of going back to sleep. I love you, Dad, I said. I know. That's what makes this so tragic. He hung up, and I was alone again in the hotel room with my calculations and my maps and my carefully constructed plans. Outside, the city was going about its business. People were eating dinner, watching television, sleeping peacefully in beds they'd made for themselves. They had no idea that the fragile system protecting them was about to collapse. that a man was about to step outside of law in order to restore something that law and order had failed to protect. They had no idea that I was that man. And tomorrow, everything would change. The knock on my hotel door came at midnight. I opened it to find a woman I'd never seen before, early 60s, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor. She didn't introduce herself. She just walked past me into the room like she'd been invited. "Close the door," she said. Her name was Daphne Ashford, criminal defense attorney, 40 years of practice. The kind of lawyer who defended people the system had already decided were guilty. She'd represented drug lords, human traffickers, and corrupt politicians. She'd won cases that shouldn't have been winnable. And she was here, in my hotel room at midnight, which meant something had shifted. "Victor sent you," I said. "Victor doesn't know I'm here. If he did, he'd kill me." She sat in the chair by the window without being asked. "I'm here because I've been investigating Victor for 6 years. Privately. Off the books. And I've come to the conclusion that the legal system can't touch him. Not through normal channels. The corruption is too deep. The money is too extensive. The fear he's created is too pervasive." "Then why are you here?" "Because your father reached out to me 2 years ago. He knew I was investigating Victor. He gave me access to his documentation. And he told me that when the time came, when things reached a critical point, I should contact his son and tell him the truth." She pulled a folder from her bag. Thick, professional, legal briefs, photographs, financial documents, testimony transcripts. "Everything in here is inadmissible in court," she said, "because I obtained most of it illegally. But it tells a story about a man who's killed at least 12 people, who's trafficking drugs and weapons across multiple states, who's sexually exploited minors, who's corrupted judges, police officers, and city officials. A story about a man who should have been in prison 30 years ago, but isn't because he's too careful and too well-connected. Why show me this? Because the legal system has failed. Because justice through the courts isn't going to happen. Because your father understood that sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to step outside the law." She leaned forward. "And because I think you're capable of doing what needs to be done." I took the folder but didn't open it. "What exactly do you think needs to be done?" "That depends on you. I can tell you what the law would do if it actually worked. It would arrest Victor. It would prosecute him. It would sentence him to prison for multiple consecutive life sentences. But we both know that's not going to happen." She stood up and walked to the window. "The question is whether you're willing to do what the law can't do. I'm not a killer. Aren't you? You're a ranger. That means you've been trained to kill in service of your country. It means you've probably killed before. It means you're capable of making the calculations that civilians can't make." She turned to face me. "I'm not asking you to kill Victor. I'm asking you to consider what might be necessary if the legal system fails. I'm asking you to be honest about what you're capable of. And if I refuse, then Victor wins. He keeps operating. He keeps predating on vulnerable people. He keeps corrupting the system that's supposed to protect them. He probably kills your mother within the next 6 months because she's become a loose end. And he probably kills you because you've become a liability." Daphne stayed for another hour. We went through the folder together. Photographs of young girls, runaways Victor had exploited. Bank records showing millions of dollars flowing through untraceable accounts. Hospital records of people who'd been tortured and released as warnings. Court transcripts where witnesses mysteriously recanted their testimony. What struck me most was how systematic it all was. Victor wasn't a criminal who'd stumbled into success. He was an architect of exploitation. He'd built a machine that turned human suffering into profit and power. "The federal investigation will take years," Daphne said as she was leaving. "Even if it succeeds, and it probably won't, Victor will appeal, delay, tie up the courts. He'll probably die of old age before he spends a single day in prison. Is that justice? No. Then what is?" She left without waiting for an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark hotel room and felt the weight of the choice pressing down on me. Daphne had articulated something I'd been avoiding. The possibility that I might have to kill Victor. Not in self-defense, not in the heat of combat, but deliberately, with forethought, with intention. Murder, dressed up in the language of justice. The next morning, I met with Evan Rodriguez. I didn't tell him about Daphne. That would have complicated everything legally. But I asked him directly, what happens if Victor runs? If he disappears before the grand jury convenes? We issue a warrant. Interpol gets involved. We extradite him from wherever he goes. And if he doesn't go anywhere? If he decides to fight? Then we go to trial. We present evidence. We hope the jury sees what we see. A criminal organization that's operated with impunity for decades. And if the jury acquits him? Evan was quiet for a long moment. Then justice fails. And he walks away. That's a real possibility? With a lawyer like Daphne Ashford. And she will represent him? Absolutely. She's brilliant and ruthless, and she knows every loophole in the system. Victor has the money to pay her. The case becomes about procedure and technicalities rather than guilt or innocence. I understood then that Daphne hadn't been trying to manipulate me. She'd been being honest about the system's failure. Over the next 3 days, I prepared. Not for what was necessarily coming, but for possibilities. I studied Victor's movements, his routines, his vulnerabilities. I identified places where he was alone or nearly alone. I calculated response times and escape routes. I was building contingency plans like I had when I was in the military, running scenarios, identifying failure points, determining acceptable losses. The difference was that this time, I was the only asset in the field. There was no backup, no extraction team, no rules of engagement other than the ones I created for myself. On the evening of the 4th day, I received a call from Brooks Sullivan. Federal grand jury convenes tomorrow. You need to testify. We need to lock down your testimony before anything else happens. I'll be there. There's something else. We intercepted communications between Victor and someone we believe is a contract killer. They're discussing you. They're discussing the possibility of eliminating you before the grand jury hears evidence. When? Could be any time. Tonight. Tomorrow morning. We're putting protective detail on you. But no protective detail. That will just warn them that I know they're coming. Then you're vulnerable. I'm always vulnerable. That's not new. That night, I sat in my hotel room and made a decision. I called Daphne Ashford. She answered on the 3rd ring, like she'd been waiting for my call. I need to know something, I said. If I do what needs to be done, if I stop Victor in a way the system can't, what happens to me? You go to prison. Or you disappear. Probably both, eventually. And my family is better off than they would be if Victor remained operational. That's the only honest answer I can give you. I hung up and opened the folder she'd given me. Started reading through it carefully. Reading about the girls. Reading about the victims. Reading about all the ways the system had failed them. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something at my door. A card being slipped underneath. I picked it up. It was a business card for a man named Hunter. Underneath the name, a single line. Your last chance to talk. I called the number on the card. Hunter answered immediately. You got my message. I did. I'm an intermediary. I work for people with problems that need solutions. Victor's got a problem. That problem is you. He's willing to pay $500,000 to make you disappear. Permanently. And if I don't disappear, then you're going to have an accident. A car crash, maybe. Or a hotel fire. Something unfortunate and tragic and completely unrelated to anything Victor might have done. When? Could be tomorrow. Could be next week. Victor likes to keep people anxious. Keeps them from thinking clearly. I understood then that I was out of time. The grand jury hearing was tomorrow. After that, everything would be on record. The federal machinery would be in motion. Victor would either run or fight. But he'd do it knowing exactly what I knew and exactly what evidence existed against him. Or he'd eliminate me tonight and buy himself time. Tell Victor I'll meet him, I said. He's not interested in meeting. Tell him I have something his lawyer doesn't know about. Something that changes the entire case. Tell him if he wants it, he meets me. Alone. Tonight. Midnight. The abandoned warehouse on 4th and Riverside. He's not going to tell him. If he's smart, he'll come. If he's scared, he'll send someone to kill me. Either way, everything ends tonight. I hung up before Hunter could respond. The warehouse on 4th and Riverside had been condemned for 5 years. It was the kind of place where people disappeared, where bodies were found months later, where nobody asked questions. It was also the kind of place where a man like me could have certain advantages over men who relied on fear and money instead of strategy and training. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I had no intention of killing Victor tonight, but I had every intention of ensuring that if tonight was when this ended, it would end in a way I could control. I'd spent 15 years trying to leave the Ranger behind, trying to be a normal man with a normal life. But standing in that condemned warehouse, checking weapons I shouldn't have had, running through scenarios for encounters that shouldn't happen, I realized something my father had known all along. Some men don't get to choose who they are. Some men are shaped by circumstances beyond their control into instruments of violence and justice. And the only real choice they get is whether to acknowledge that truth or spend their entire life lying to themselves about it. I'd spent 15 years lying. Tonight, I was finally going to tell the truth. Part 7. The revelation, why father never fought back. Victor didn't show up at midnight. I waited in the warehouse for 4 hours. Stood in the darkness, surrounded by machinery that hadn't moved in years, listening to the building settle and creak around me. At 4 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. Your father wants to see you. Hospital. Now. I knew it was a trap. Or at least, I knew it could be. But I also knew that my father was dying, and if this was genuine, if he actually needed me, then the warehouse could wait. Victor would still be there tomorrow. The grand jury would still convene. The world would still be waiting for me to make a choice. When I arrived at the hospital, my father was awake, alert, more present than he'd been in weeks. The doctors said the cancer had accelerated, that his body was shutting down, that he probably had days left. But his mind was sharp, sharpened by the approach of ending, like death was a stone he was being ground against. You didn't kill him, my father said. It wasn't a question. No. Why not? I sat down next to the bed. Because I'm not sure I should. My father nodded slowly. He'd been waiting for this conversation. I need to tell you something. Something I've been keeping from you because I was afraid you'd stop if you knew. Stop what? Stop pushing forward. Stop being willing to cross lines you shouldn't cross. He took a long breath. The machines beside him beeped steadily, recording his slow decline. I didn't just document Victor's crimes, he said. I was part of them. For years. After I left the organized life, I thought I was completely clean. But I wasn't. Victor had leverage over me. He had photographs. He had evidence of things I'd done. So he kept me on retainer. Kept me available for jobs that needed doing. What kind of jobs? The kind you don't ask questions about. I drove people. I transported packages. I helped dispose of situations that needed disposing of. He looked directly at me. I helped with murders, son. Not directly. I didn't pull triggers. But I was complicit. I was part of the machinery. The words hung in the air between us. Everything I thought I knew about my father shifted. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand something about Victor. He's not just a criminal who got lucky or used corruption to stay ahead of the law. He's a predator. And predators understand other predators. Victor saw something in me, years ago, that understood him. That understood how to operate in that space between legality and illegality. That understood how to make hard choices. My father coughed. A wet, painful sound that seemed to come from deep inside him. And he sees the same thing in you, he continued. But you've been fighting it. You've been trying to be someone different. Someone better. And I supported that. I was proud of it. But I was also lying to you about something important. What? That you have a choice about who you are. You don't. You're like me. You're like Victor. You're a man who can operate in spaces where other men can't operate. Where the normal rules don't apply. That's not a flaw. It's not something you need to overcome. It's what you are. I wanted to argue with him. Wanted to tell him he was wrong. But I couldn't. because I knew he wasn't. The attack, I said. Did you let him do it? Did you actually let Victor beat you? Yes. Why? Because I needed you to understand what was at stake. Because I needed you to wake up the part of you that you've been trying to suppress. Because I was dying anyway, and I wanted my death to mean something. He paused. And because I knew that if I didn't wake you up, Victor would eventually make a move that would force you to choose anyway. This way, I got to choose the terms of the awakening. That's insane. It's strategic. It's what men like us do. We make calculated sacrifices for outcomes we can control. He reached for my hand. I'm not proud of everything I've been, but I'm not ashamed of it either. I did what I needed to do to survive. I did what I needed to do to protect my family. And when I couldn't do that through legitimate means, I did it through other means. And now you want me to do the same. I want you to stop pretending you're someone you're not. I want you to accept who you are and make choices based on that acceptance rather than on fantasy. He squeezed my hand. Victor is going to kill people. Lots of people. If you don't stop him, they will die. Innocent people. People like those girls in Daphne's file. People who have no power to protect themselves. And the legal system won't save them because the legal system is already compromised. So I kill him. I'm not saying you should kill him. I'm saying you should do what needs to be done. And if what needs to be done is killing, then you do that without flinching, without guilt, because the alternative is allowing a predator to continue preying. He lay back against the pillow. He was exhausted now, the conversation draining what little energy remained. I want you to know something, he said quietly. I'm proud of you, not because of what you might do to Victor, but because you've struggled with this, because you've tried to be better, because you've actually cared about the difference between justice and revenge. Most men in our situation don't bother. Most men just become machines of violence. But you've been trying to find the line, trying to respect it. And now I'm telling you that the line doesn't exist. There's only survival and failure. There's only action and consequence. Everything else is philosophy. And philosophy doesn't save people. A nurse came in and asked me to step out so she could check his vitals. I stood in the hallway and felt something shift inside me. Not acceptance exactly, but recognition. A ceasing of the internal argument I'd been having since I was old enough to understand what my father was. When I went back in, my father was sleeping. But before the nurse closed the curtain, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. One more thing, he whispered. Victor didn't send anyone to the warehouse tonight. He was testing you. He wanted to see if you'd actually go through with it. If you'd killed someone in that warehouse, anyone, guilty or innocent, then you would have crossed a line you couldn't come back from. Victor wanted to know if you were capable of that, if you were willing to become what he is. Why would he want that? Because if you crossed that line, he could control you. You'd be complicit in something you couldn't undo. He'd have leverage. He'd have you. My father's eyes closed. I didn't let you kill him tonight because you're not ready. Not because it's wrong, but because you need to understand what you're choosing before you choose it. You need to know what comes after, and you need to be at peace with it. He fell asleep then, and I sat beside him and watched his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The floor dripped clear fluid into his failing body. And I understood, finally, that my father had orchestrated this entire situation not to wake me up. I was already awake, but to teach me something about choice, about consequence, about the difference between being capable of violence and being willing to commit it. The grand jury hearing was in 8 hours. By then, everything would be on record. By then, there would be no going back to normal life. I left the hospital as the sun was rising. The city was waking up, people going to work, children going to school, the machinery of daily life grinding forward. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea that the relatively safe system they depended on was about to be exposed as fundamentally corrupt. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke Sullivan. We're hearing chatter. Victor's moving money, consolidating assets. He's preparing to run or prepare for arrest. Whatever happens, it happens today. I knew what I needed to do, not because my father had told me to do it, Not because Daphne had suggested it, but because I'd finally accepted what I actually was beneath all the denial and the wishful thinking. I was my father's son. I was a ranger. I was a man capable of operating in the spaces between law and chaos. And the choice in front of me wasn't whether to use those capabilities. The choice was whether to use them in service of something, or to let them rust while innocent people suffered. I texted back to Brooke, "I'm ready to testify." "What time?" 10 a.m. Federal courthouse. "Don't be late." I had 10 hours. 10 hours to prepare myself for testimony that would put me in the public eye. That would expose me as someone connected to organized crime. That would make me a target not just for Victor, but for everyone in his network. 10 hours before my life became irrevocably public. I spent them preparing not for the courtroom, but for what would come after. Part 8. The classified operation. Using military resources legally, the federal courthouse was a fortress of marble and authority. Armed guards stood at every entrance. Metal detectors hummed their electronic songs. Security cameras tracked movement through hallways that echoed with the footsteps of people whose lives were about to be permanently altered. I arrived at 9:30 a.m. Evan Rodriguez was waiting in a small room off the main corridor. With him were two people I'd never met before. A man in his early 60s with military bearing, sharp eyes, expensive suit, the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying. And a woman in her 40s with a federal badge clipped to her belt. "This is Colonel Marcus Tristan," Evans said. "He's liaison between the Department of Defense and federal law enforcement. And this is Agent Patricia Quinn from the FBI's Organized Crime Division." Tristan shook my hand firmly. "Your testimony today is critical, but we need to discuss something before you go in that courtroom." We moved into a private conference room. Secure. Swept for listening devices. The kind of space where classified conversations happened. "The FBI has been investigating Victor for 3 years, Quinn said. "We've documented his connections to Mexican cartels. We've identified at least 6 murders he's directly responsible for. But we've never had enough admissible evidence to prosecute. Your father's documentation changes that. Your testimony solidifies it. So the case is strong?" "It's strong enough," Evans said. "But Victor's defense will attack it from every angle. They'll argue your father was complicit in crimes and therefore unreliable. They'll argue you have personal motivation. They'll argue the evidence was gathered improperly. They'll make this trial about procedure instead of guilt." "What about the federal level?" I asked. "Could this become a national security investigation?" Tristan exchanged a look with Quinn. "That depends on what you're asking. I'm asking if there's a way to handle this outside the normal judicial system. A way that doesn't leave room for appeal or technicality or courtroom theater." "There is," Quinn said carefully. "But it requires you to make a specific choice. A choice that takes you outside civilian law enforcement and into classified territory." "What kind of choice?" "The Midnight Riders have documented connections to international cartels," Tristan explained. "That makes them a potential national security threat. The military has authority, limited but real, to investigate and take action against organizations that pose such threats. We can recruit you as a civilian contractor. You'd be working under military authority rather than civilian law enforcement. Your actions would be sanctioned by the Department of Defense." "What actions?" "Surveillance, intelligence gathering, disruption of operations, potentially neutralization of key targets if they pose imminent threat to national security." The words were carefully chosen. Neutral, technical, but what they meant was clear. The military was offering me a way to operate outside the civilian system. A way to do what needed to be done without the legal complications. "If I do this," I said, "what happens to the civilian case?" "It goes forward," Evans said. "But we slow it down. We give the military operation time to develop fully. By the time the civilian case reaches trial, Victor's already been neutralized at the federal level. The trial becomes moot. Or Victor runs, and you never catch him." "That's possible," Quinn admitted. "But the military operation would give us resources we don't have in the civilian system. We could track him internationally. We could coordinate with allies. We could make it very difficult for him to hide. Tristan leaned forward. Let me be direct. The military has been waiting for the right opportunity to move against this network. Your father's documentation gives us that opportunity. What we need from you is operational intelligence. You know Victor. You know his patterns. You know what he's capable of. We need you to help us plan an operation that neutralizes him permanently. Neutralizes meaning? Meaning he stops being a threat. That could be incapacitation, arrest, relocation, or death. The details depend on operational circumstances. I understood what they were offering. Not just a legal way to operate outside normal law enforcement, but a way to do it with the full weight of the United States military behind me. A way to ensure Victor couldn't escape through legal maneuvering or corruption or international flight. I need to think about this, I said. You have until after your testimony, Evans said. Testify. Lock down your evidence. Make it clear to the court that we have a strong case. Then you come back here, and we discuss your next steps. The grand jury hearing lasted 6 hours. I testified about my father's documentation. I described the photographs, the records, the evidence of corruption. Evan walked me through the chain of custody, establishing that everything had been properly preserved and organized. Victor's lawyer, Daphne Ashford, as expected, cross-examined me brutally. She attacked my credibility, pointing out my military background, suggesting I had personal vendetta, implying that I was manipulating evidence. She was brilliant and relentless. She made me look like someone with every reason to lie. But the evidence spoke louder than her questions. By the end of the day, the grand jury had voted to indict Victor on 17 counts, including organized crime, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and trafficking in controlled substances. It wasn't enough to convict, but it was enough to arrest. When I came back to the conference room, Tristan was waiting. Victor's being arrested in 40 minutes, he said. We coordinated with local law enforcement. He's going to be taken into federal custody immediately. That gives us a window, probably 72 hours, before his lawyer can post bail and start the legal process. What do you want from me? We want you to help us conduct a full operational analysis of his network. We need to understand the structure, the key players, the vulnerable points. We need to know how to dismantle the entire organization, not just arrest Victor. And after that, we move. We execute warrants on his properties. We arrest his lieutenants. We seize his assets. And we ensure that when Victor gets to trial, he has no resources, no organization, and no way to threaten witnesses or manipulate the outcome. Over the next 72 hours, I worked with a military intelligence team I'd never known existed. They had files on every known associate of Victor's. They had surveillance footage from dozens of locations. They had financial records showing money flows that would have taken civilian law enforcement years to untangle. We built a map of the entire organization. We identified weak points. We calculated optimal timing for simultaneous arrests across multiple jurisdictions. We created a plan so comprehensive that it would be almost impossible for any part of Victor's network to survive its execution. What struck me most was the efficiency. The military didn't care about legal procedure or admissible evidence or courtroom technicalities. They cared about disruption and control. They had tools and resources that made the civilian system look like it was operating from the Stone Age. On the fourth day, Tristan called me into his office. We're moving tonight, he said. Simultaneous operations across 7 states. 43 arrests. Asset seizure totaling approximately $230 million. By tomorrow morning, the Midnight Riders as an organization will cease to exist. What about Victor? Victor's being transferred to a federal facility in Colorado. He'll be held without bail pending trial. His lawyer can file motions, but she won't win. The evidence is too strong. The federal case is too tight. He could still walk. Not this time. Because the military's investigation runs parallel to the civilian investigation. We have evidence that will never see the inside of a courtroom but that feeds into the civilian process. We've contaminated every possible legal avenue he could use. By the time he reaches trial, he'll have no choice but to plead guilty or face a guaranteed life sentence. That night, I watched the operations unfold from a federal command center. Real-time feeds from raids across the country. SWAT teams breaching doors. Suspects being arrested. Equipment being seized. It was like watching a military operation, because that's exactly what it was. By 2 a.m., 43 members of the Midnight Riders organization were in federal custody. By 4 a.m., 42 of them had already agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. By 6 a.m., the organization that had operated with impunity for over 2 decades had been completely dismantled. Tristan sat back in his chair and smiled. That's how you actually fix a broken system. Not through courts and lawyers and judges. Through operational efficiency and overwhelming force. My phone buzzed. A text from my father's nurse. He's asking for you. Come now. I drove to the hospital in the dawn light. The sun was rising over a city that had changed overnight without knowing it. Somewhere in Colorado, Victor was waking up in a federal holding cell, understanding for the first time that his empire had collapsed while he slept. My father was unconscious when I arrived. The machines beside him were working harder now, pushing air into failing lungs. The monitors showed a heart that was barely maintaining rhythm. I sat beside him and held his hand. He's gone, the nurse said quietly. His organization is finished. You did it. But as I sat there, watching my father's life wind down to its final moments, I realized something important. I hadn't done it legally. I hadn't done it within the system. I'd stepped outside that system completely, using military authority to circumvent civilian law and procedures. I'd become exactly what my father had warned me about. Exactly what Daphne had implied. Exactly what the Ranger training had prepared me for. I'd become an instrument of the state. Sanctioned. Legitimate. Legal in the narrow sense that the government had authorized it. But not innocent. Never that. My father opened his eyes one more time. Looked directly at me. It's done, he whispered. It's done. He nodded, closed his eyes, and went back to sleep. 3 days after Victor's arrest, while he sat in his federal holding cell and his empire crumbled around him, I received a visitor at my apartment. An FBI agent named Quentin Hayes. No relation to the corrupt detective from earlier. He had files. Thick ones. And when he opened them on my kitchen table, everything I thought I understood about this situation shifted. Victor wasn't always a biker, Quentin said, sliding photographs across the table. Military photographs. Official records. A younger man in a Special Forces uniform, circa the 1995. His real name is Victor Strand. He was discharged from the Army in 1998. Dishonorable discharge. Why? That's classified. But what we can tell you is that he left active duty with skills that made him valuable to certain criminal enterprises. He didn't build his organization from the ground up like we thought. He was recruited into it by someone with military connections. Quentin pulled out another photograph. This one showed Victor meeting with someone I recognized immediately. My stomach dropped. That's Detective Colin Hayes, I said. Former detective and former Special Forces. He was discharged the same year as Victor. Under similar circumstances. They knew each other in the military. They went into organized crime together. The connection crystallized. The detective who dismissed my father's case, who'd told me to let it go, who'd essentially protected Victor, he'd been Victor's partner. Not just corrupted by the system. Integral to it. There's more, Quentin said. He pulled out surveillance photographs spanning decades. Meetings between Victor and military personnel. Between Victor and federal agents. Between Victor and people whose faces were redacted because they were apparently still active in federal service. Victor's operation isn't independent, Quentin explained. It's connected to something much larger. A network that extends into military intelligence, federal law enforcement, and international crime syndicates. Victor was operating under protection, official protection, Because he was providing services to people inside the system. What kind of services? The kind you don't ask about. Interrogation. Elimination of inconvenient witnesses. Disruption of rival operations. Basically, dirty work that the government wanted done but couldn't do officially. The room tilted. Everything I'd been fighting against, the corruption, the system failure, the impunity, it wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature. Victor hadn't corrupted the government. The government had corrupted itself and used Victor as one of its instruments. Who authorized this? I asked. That's the question we're still trying to answer. It goes higher than we initially thought. We're talking about people with real power, real authority, people who've been protecting Victor for 20 years. Then how did you arrest him? Because there was a faction that wanted him arrested. A faction that got tired of Victor operating independently, that wanted to regain control of the operation or shut it down completely. Your father's documentation gave them the ammunition they needed to justify his arrest internally. I understood then why Tristan had been so quick to authorize military involvement, why Quinn had moved so fast, why the operation had been so comprehensive. They weren't cleaning up corruption. They were managing it, reshuffling power, eliminating a player who'd gotten too visible, too ambitious, too willing to operate outside his assigned role. What about my father? I asked. Was he part of this? We're still investigating that. But based on what we've found, he may have been. He may have been doing jobs for people connected to this network. He may have been controlled opposition, appearing to be independent while actually being managed. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My father had presented everything as a choice, as if I was deciding to do something against the system. But what if the system had been steering me all along? What if my father's attack, my investigation, my recruitment into military operations, what if it had all been orchestrated? Victor's going to walk, I said suddenly. That's why you're telling me this. He's going to get convicted in the civilian trial, but before sentencing, someone's going to intervene. Someone from inside the government is going to make sure he doesn't spend real time in prison. Quentin didn't say anything, which was an answer in itself. Unless, I continued, something happens to him first. Unless he becomes unable to testify, unable to expose the network that protected him. That's not something we can authorize, Quentin said carefully. But it's something that might happen anyway. Accidentally. During transport, maybe. Or in prison. Inmates find ways. Quentin closed his files and stood up. I came here to warn you. To let you know that nothing is what it seems. That the victory you thought you won might actually be a rearrangement of pieces on a board you don't fully understand. That your father might have been more complicit than you realized. Why tell me this? Because there are people in the government who respect what you did, who see potential in you, and they want to know if you're smart enough to understand that the real power isn't in fighting the system. It's in becoming part of it. He left his card on the table and walked out. I sat alone in my apartment and understood finally that my father had lied to me, or at least, not told me the complete truth. He'd positioned me to believe I was making a choice against corruption, when really I'd been making a choice about which corruption to align myself with. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. Victor's trial began 6 weeks later. By then, my father was dead. He'd passed quietly one night in the hospital, his cancer finally claiming what his body could no longer defend. I'd held his hand at the end. He'd squeezed it once, then let go. The courtroom was packed. Media everywhere. Cameras outside. This had become a spectacle, the corruption exposed, the biker boss brought down, the system apparently working. Nobody knew about the deeper game being played. Nobody knew that Victor's arrest was just a move in a larger chess match. I testified for 3 days. Evan walked me through the evidence again. Daphne cross-examined me with surgical precision. She attacked every detail, every assumption, every piece of logic. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, documents, bank records, testimony from 42 cooperating witnesses who decided that their organization was finished and their only path to survival was cooperation. Victor sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking smaller than I expected. Not defeated exactly, but contained, like a predator in a cage, calculating angles, looking for weakness. On the fourth day of trial, something unexpected happened. A federal agent walked into the courtroom with a sealed envelope, handed it to the judge. The judge's expression changed immediately. He called for a recess and summoned both attorneys to chambers. I didn't know what was in that envelope, but I could guess. 20 minutes later, the trial resumed. The judge announced that new evidence had been presented to the court. Evidence that would require the jury to be sequestered while the court determined its admissibility. Evan leaned over to me. Something's happening. I don't know what, but something's happening. The jury was sent out. The judge ordered a brief recess. And then, something I never expected occurred. Victor stood up and addressed the court directly. "I want to enter a plea," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. Daphne grabbed his arm. "Victor, don't. Guilty," he continued. "To all charges. I want to plead guilty to all charges." The courtroom erupted. Daphne looked like she'd been slapped. Evan stood up, confused. The judge called for order. "Mr. Strand," the judge said carefully, "you understand what you're saying? You're giving up your right to trial. You're admitting guilt to 17 felony counts. I understand. And you're doing this of your own volition? Not under duress. I'm doing it because continuing this trial would harm people I care about. People who've been kind to me. People who don't deserve what's going to happen if this trial continues." I realized then what had happened. Whatever was in that sealed envelope, it was something that would expose the network protecting Victor. Something that would implicate federal agents, military officials, maybe even judges or politicians. And Victor had been offered a choice: plead guilty and disappear into the federal prison system, or continue the trial and force the government to expose itself. He'd chosen to disappear. The sentencing hearing was brief. Victor received 4 consecutive life sentences. He'd spend the rest of his existence in a maximum security federal prison, isolated from the outside world, cut off from his network. Not dead, but effectively erased. It should have felt like victory, but all I felt was the weight of understanding how the game actually worked. After the hearing, Tristan found me in the hallway outside the courtroom. "You did well," he said. "I did what you wanted me to do." "Yes. And now we need to discuss your next assignment." "I'm not interested in assignments." "You will be. Because we have a proposition for you." He handed me a business card. "Different name. Different title. Join us officially. Become part of the system instead of fighting it. You have skills we need. Capabilities we can use. And frankly, you're too dangerous to leave operating independently." I understood what he was really saying. They could arrest me for my involvement in the military operation. They could prosecute me for stepping outside civilian law. Or I could join them. Become sanctioned. Legitimate. Part of the machinery. What if I refuse? Then you become a liability. And we deal with liabilities the way we've always dealt with them. I took the card. Not because I was going to call, but because accepting it bought me time to decide what came next. That night, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. The stone was simple. No epitaph. Just his name and dates. 47 years of life reduced to numbers. I stood there in the darkness and understood finally what my father had been trying to teach me. Not about justice or revenge or the corruption of systems, but about choice. About understanding that every choice had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate moment. That becoming part of the machinery meant you became responsible for everything it did. And that sometimes the only real rebellion was refusing to play at all. 6 months after Victor's conviction, I received a letter from my dead father. Postmarked from the federal penitentiary. His handwriting on the envelope. Instructions inside. Open only after you've made your final decision. I carried that envelope for 3 weeks. Because I knew what it meant. The choice was concrete now. Join Tristan's organization or disappear completely. My mother called one Tuesday. She was selling the house, moving to Arizona, remarrying, rebuilding. "Your father wanted us to move forward," she said. "He told me he was trying to wake you up." that you were pretending to be someone you weren't. When I finally opened the letter, my father's voice was clear across the distance of death. I orchestrated everything, my attack, your involvement, Victor's arrest. I did it because you needed to understand that we are the system. Every choice creates it. Victor didn't corrupt it. He was created by it. Like me. Like you. The only question isn't whether to fight the system or join it. It's whether you'll acknowledge what you are or spend your life lying about it. If you join Tristan, do it consciously. Understand the machinery will hurt people. Do it deliberately. Or walk away. Genuinely. Find someone who loves you despite what you are. Try to be better, even if that man doesn't exist. Whatever you choose, choose consciously. Don't drift like I did. I called Tristan. I'm not joining you. You understand what that means? You won't eliminate me. Because I know too much. Because the moment you move against me, Victor talks. The network collapses. He laughed. You've thought about this. I have. I disappeared that night. Drove south for 3 days. Ended up in a small town in New Mexico. 3,000 people. Nobody asked questions. I got a job at an auto shop. The owner was Julian. Quiet. Competent. Didn't care about my past. For the first time, I had simple work. Real work. Honest work. 3 months later, I got a package. A photograph of my mother getting remarried. My siblings smiling. My ex-wife and children. Everyone moving forward. A note from my mother. We're proud of you. For whatever you chose to do. Come visit when you're ready. That's when I understood what my father had taught me. Not about right or wrong. Not about fighting systems or joining them. But that every choice has a cost. That redemption isn't perfection. It's consciousness. It's accepting what you are and choosing to be slightly better. I'm still in that town. Still working at that shop. I don't have clean hands. But I have something my father never had. Honesty. And that's worth more than any empire. More than any revenge. More than all the justice in the world. I need to hear from you. Which moment hit hardest? The father's attack? The wife leaving? The military twist? The final letter? What stories do you want next? Revenge? Betrayal? Family conflict? Military thrillers? Dark twists? Comment your city or country. I want to know where you're watching from. Your feedback shapes every story we create. Tell me what moves you. Tell me what breaks you. Tell me what keeps you awake at night wanting more. Hit like. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. The next story is already waiting. And it might be more shocking than this one. What will your story be? Tell me in the comments.